Hey everyone, it's Michael Kikle. I hope you're doing well today, and I have a review here for the Marvel Comics event, Fear Itself. I've never read Fear Itself, never read any of the tie-ins, just so you know. I've heard that, like most of the Marvel tie-ins for these events, that it kind of fleshes this out, but I don't know whether I would be willing to try those out the way I was with Civil War. Maybe the Spider-Man tie-in, whatever. Fear Itself was written by Matt Fraction, one of the best comic book writers ever, in my opinion. His Iron Man run at the time when this was coming out was so good. I think this was released around 2011, if I remember correctly, doing my very, very minimal amount of research for this review. I usually just like to review the book itself that I'm talking about. But with events, it's a little bit different. You have to kind of cover certain things. Matt Fraction has some really great ideas with this in concept. There are certain issues that I have with like transformations and whatnot I'm going to probably be kind of vague on in the review. I know it's old as a video or as a release, but still I don't want to spoil too much because there's a lot of people out there like me who want to get into this stuff and there's no reviews on YouTube that are not just summaries. You know what I mean? But the penciler here is Stuart Eminem, and I think he does a really good job despite, again, some of those transformations later on in the book kind of suck. And I don't know if it's him and Fraction or just him. Anyway, there's also a prologue prelude issue in here that leads into the story of Fear Itself, kind of setting it up a little bit, from Ed Brubaker. And of course, he was doing like the Cap issues and stuff, I think at the exact same time, you know, when the Winter Soldier storyline was going on. Bucky was Captain America now. And so this event in total, this book that I'm actually reviewing, has some really good stuff behind it, in my personal opinion. I was excited for it, but I didn't really understand what I was getting into with this. I had never heard anybody really talk about it. I didn't know it was going to be an Asgard versus Earth type of story. Pretty much a big war, essentially. I guess I can go ahead and start getting into this, but again, just to kind of remind you again, I haven't read any of the tie-ins. I don't know anything outside of what's in this trade itself. I want that to be known because a lot of the time, like when I read Civil War, my first ever event back in the day, that was a terrible trade. All the tie-ins made it so much better because it actually added real context to a terrible-ass trade paperback, right? Same thing here. I feel like the other stories could flesh it out, but this is at least a little bit better than Civil War in some respects. Not in concept for me, but at least in execution it is. But anyway, I guess I can go into the plot a little bit. Basically, apparently at some point, and maybe I'm getting some of this info wrong, Asgard somehow either fell to Earth or came to Earth or was part of Earth or something, and the city is destroyed. Asgard is no more. Odin's not happy about it. But in the prologue issue in here, the first of the 8 issues included in this trade, the daughter of the Red Skull, who's named Sin, her and Baron Zemo actually go and find a hammer that's like enchanted that only the one person that is supposed to be, I guess, prophesied, but kind of not prophesied. These hammers could be on the Earth for ages, you know? But the person who's supposed to hold it is the only one who can hold it. Kind of like Thor and his hammer, Mjolnir, but not really. But she is the one that is tied to this hammer. She picks it up, it transforms her into kind of like an Asgardian character, even though the Red Skull's daughter, Sin, or whatever, is technically human, right? I guess. She's ugly as hell, that's all I know. She gets transformed, and she's kind of the leader of this new Asgardian order that's going up. There's a man who begins to lead her that is in control of a hammer and whatnot. He's kind of nicknamed the Serpent, and I guess they kind of also call him Kul, C-U-L. And he's Odin's brother. Thor's dad, Thor's uncle in this case. Odin apparently has a prophecy that he created, is what he says later on, that Thor will have to go up and fight this serpent uncle guy and probably die. So there's a little bit of tension there. I'm not a big Thor guy. I love what they did with Thor and Odin's father-son relationship here. Thor is not the biggest focus of this story, but kind of in hindsight, he is by the end of it because of how much goes down here. There's quite a few notable deaths at the time, even though apparently they were reversed not very long after that. There was some really good shit in here, just so you know. But more of these weapons, because of the serpent, come to Earth, and certain people come into contact with them, two of them being the Hulk and the Thing from the Fantastic Four, and they get transformed heavily too. The Asgardian transformation of these guys, I just don't like. I don't like the design for literally anyone who gets an Asgardian upgrade in here. I don't care if it's from the Serpent's weapons or later on something else that Odin does. They suck. I just don't like the look of them at all. I know that comics can very much vary on good costume versus bad costume. Then you have costumes that are super generic looking to me, like that Parker Industries Spider-Man costume with the light up eyes and the light up spider on the chest. Just not a fan of it. When Spider-Man 2099 got his new costume years ago from David, God, I'm so bad on names today. Peter David, excuse me. When he got that white costume with the red outline and stuff, I hate that shit too. I think it's not even close to being as cool as the blue and red 2099 costume. Comics have an issue of doing this. To me, you don't need to update costumes that often. It would be one thing if you're doing it to sell toys or new comic covers that actually have cool costumes. But a lot of the time that's not the case, and this is a great example of one of those books that gets a lot of upgrades for different heroes and villains. Most of the Serpent's henchmen are villains that have these hammer weapons and stuff. I won't name off everybody. I really honestly don't remember everybody that got an upgrade because it's been 2 days. Since most of them are shown. A lot of them are kind of forgotten by the end of the book. But basically, Odin and Thor don't have a good relationship as father and son. Thor wants to defend the planet. Odin kind of wants to run. Odin loves his son Thor, but he kind of takes Thor as a fool for trying to be more human than God. There's this whole kind of side story in here too about just the regular humans who live where they tried to rebuild Asgard. And so there's this whole thing about, at the time the economy was still bad, no one could find jobs here in America, or in the world for that matter. And it really has a big focus on how people were struggling so bad they were losing their houses and shit. That's a big part of the story. And to me, it doesn't really pay off. It feels like kind of the precursor to 2016 Marvel Comics, where we're trying to hit current issues, not as ridiculously bad as Marvel does now, and for the last 10 years or so, but we're trying so hard to incorporate what's happening to people right now that would not be buying the fucking comics to begin with. It kind of gets in the way, in my opinion. It feels like there's a little bit of time wasted there. There's one neighbor character to where they're rebuilding Asgard, that by the end comes in and has a scene with Captain America that was really nice. I really liked that. There's some stuff in here with Bucky for a couple of scenes. It's kind of tagged on, but it really motivated Steve Rogers to do what he needed to do by the end of the book. There's a big focus on him, Thor, Odin, and Iron Man. And there's some stuff that Tony does by the end of the book that I really dig to kind of help out the situation. But, Tony being a drunk, there's some really great scenes where he's actually arguing with Odin and name-calling him. And I thought that was pretty funny, too, to watch. But outside of that, the book itself, it's a beautiful piece of art, the way it's drawn. I like Matt Fraction's banter. I like the way he has the characters talk. I think Matt Fraction gets these characters so well. But again, I really like what they did with Thor and Odin here. Thor is really, and Asgard really is, the focus of this story. And again, you wouldn't get that from the title of this storyline. But do I regret reading this story? No, I had a good time. I just wish it was better. You know what I mean? I wish it had more going for it. I wish it was more developed. I wish maybe we had a couple more issues, but I don't know if we really needed that either, if it makes sense. I don't know if it could have helped the situation at all. Again, I think this is better than Civil War, but not by a whole lot. And I don't like that events constantly have us in a situation where we have to buy a million tie-ins to really get context for situations or resolutions for certain parts that are kind of brought up for a moment in these events. Now, Fear itself is less bad about that than Civil War. But still, it's kind of ruined Marvel. I mean, we got to the point we had multiple events a year. Remember all the Venom events? Like, you had Venomverse and, God, what was it? There was another Venom event that literally hit within less than a year, not too long ago, like 6 years ago, 7 years ago. I remember reading it. It was when I first got this new Kindle and stuff for my wife. And I love Venom, so I was a little overwhelmed by that too, despite my love for symbiote stories. But yeah, it's too much. I mean, we got to stop doing that because the events are getting worse and worse, less interesting over time, especially nowadays. But DC and Marvel are really bad about this, dude. Remember when Rebirth at DC did the whole Return of the Monster Men thing and how shitty that was? Stop doing the events unless you really have something special to do. That's what I think you need to do from now on. But Fear itself, again, I kind of recommend it if you're into Marvel Comics, obviously. If you love Thor, if you love Cap, if you love Iron Man, this is really centered around them. It's got some cool stuff, despite some of the lame-o villains. I don't really think the Serpent is that great of a villain. In concept, again, being the uncle of Thor, kind of cool. Odin is kind of a villain here. It's not bad. But then you have, like, Sin and, like, these other Asgardian updates to heroes like Hulk and The Thing and some other villains and stuff. That stuff doesn't interest me at all either. It's got flaws, big old flaws. But the book was at least fun to read. It had some really good stuff and some good emotional stuff, like I said, that kind of made it a little bit above average for me personally. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts about Fear itself. What were some of the best tie-ins? If you have some that are outside of like Spider-Man's tie-in, I'd like to read those. Just recommend them. I'll try them out sometime. But yeah, I do want to get around to that Spider-Man one at some point. It looked like it'd be kind of cool. I heard some good things. Spider-Man is not heavily in here. He's in the background or like making a line joke here and there, but that's about it. So if you're a big Spider-Man fan, I'm sorry. Anyway, what do you think about Fear itself? What's the worst and the best Marvel event that you've ever read in your life? I'd love to hear what you have to say about that down below too. Thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Catch you later, and goodbye.